Good stuff. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to Guitar Conversations. My very special guest here on the Guitar Conversations couch is the one and only Richard Niles. Welcome, Richard.
It is. Welcome. Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming along. And we're in LA at the moment, and of course you've moved back to a little while ago from.
Yes, I did.
Having lived in London for
yes,
many years.
I came back to the old country. That's what it was. I was actually born here and went to London with my parents very early on and grew up in England, in London specifically. And then after a long career there, I decided to come back to the old country and see what it was like to see the sun every once in a while.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about your career a little bit further on here. But at the moment, I want to go right back to the very beginning. I always like to start these guitar conversations because I started playing when I was really young. Yes. So I'm always fascinated how everyone started. I'm sure all guitar players are interested in how we all started because it's not always in the same kind of way or at the same age. But of course, your father was a guitar player I'm a big fan. He was a guitar hero of mine.
Well,
Tony Romano.
I was really lucky to grow up listening to just fantastic music all the time, as I know you were.
Yeah.
And my dad, Tony Romano, he had been a child star on radio, and then he, as a singer and guitar player, and then he became well known as a solo artist, and then he went on tour with Bob Hope during the war, the very first USO tour. So it was just him, Bob Hope, Jerry Colonna, and the singer Francis Langford. And he was the orchestra of the band, because they didn't have any other accompaniment. And although in later years of the USO they got more money and they were able to do more, but he was the guy, and so he accompanied everybody. And so I grew up listening to him playing, and of course to have guys like Joe Venuti playing in your living room, that's sort of, made an impression.
Well, that's the big difference between you and me. When I was a kid, I listened to my dad's records of Joe Venuti. You actually would come down into the living room, and Joe Venuti would be sitting there playing music with your dad.
It was incredible.
Astonishing.
Yeah, it was astonishing, and I also was very influenced. Apart from my father, who had a way of playing the guitar that was very harmonically sophisticated. He saw no point in doing the tunes like other people. And I think that's one of the tragedies of modern singers who may be very good singers, like Michael Bublé is a fantastic singer, but he doesn't actually do the standards in a very different way from the way that they would have been done in the old days. But my dad just used to say, well, why do I need to play that chord? This one note works on that chord really well, and then this thing. And he had a lot of little harmonic techniques that I was always impressed by. Like if there was ever, just a technical thing for you guitar players out there, but if there was ever a 7 in the melody, so let's say we're in the key of A, and the note was that, he would, instead of harmonizing it like this, 7, 7, 1, he would go,
yeah.
And I said, that sounds better. I like that. So I didn't know what it was, of course, at that time. So and then my parents divorced, and when I moved to England, I was 11, and my parents, for one reason or another, didn't want me to waste my time with music when I could be becoming a lawyer, which is where all the money was, and that they were right about that. I've now found it. But nevertheless, when I was about 14 or 15, I bought a guitar from a friend of mine for £4, which was a lot of money back in the dark ages when I was a kid. And I snuck the guitar under the bed, and whenever my parents would go out, I'd be playing a few notes.
And this is in London now.
In London, yeah. I was teaching myself to play from records, completely from records. I had no idea what I was doing. I remembered some of the stuff, of course, from my past. And then I taught myself enough that by the time I was 18, I formed a band, and we actually got a publishing deal, which was incredible. And then we toured around for 2 years, and then I was sick of it. So at that point, I really wanted to know what I was doing, so I went to Berkeley. Now, Berkeley I knew about because of Gary Burton, who was my favorite musician at that point. I loved what he was doing with music. I loved how he was making jazz that sounded like contemporary rock. And I just loved all the tunes and all the writers that he had, and I really loved the music of Michael Gibbs, who I knew about because I was in England. So I went to Berkeley, and I was lucky enough, it was quite a small school at that time, and I was lucky enough to study with Gary and with Michael Gibbs when he came to the school, which was just ridiculously great. And also then at that point, Gary invited Pat Metheny to come and teach at the school, and for some reason, which I still don't understand to this day, I was chosen to be one of the few guitar students who got to study with him. And
so this would have been about 75?
74.
74.
Early 74. That's when I first met Pat, and when Pat first came to the school. And I graduated in 75. And the interesting thing was, Gary, I think, picked me to study with Pat because he liked my writing, and he knew that Pat would like my writing, and he felt that, at least at the time, he sort of told me that some of the things that I was doing with my writing were in the same kind of direction to what Pat was doing with his writing. So that ended up being very true, and so I go into my lesson. I was concentrating on being a composer. All I was doing was writing all the time. And so I didn't have a lot of time to practice. So what I do is I go into Pat's lessons, and I'd say, hey, Pat, before we do that thing you asked me to learn, I got this new tune, and I put it up on the stand, and we play it. And that happened every lesson, and it was just great. So, and then at that point, Pat asked me to write a guitar quartet for himself. He had chosen, he was going to do a guitar thing with Mike Stern, who was also at school at the time, and another friend of mine, Mitch Kudley, and also the great Jay Azalina, who I don't know if you know, but man, what a guitar player. So that was the quartet. And so it was pretty good, and I called it the Empathy Quartet, and there's a tune, which is the sort of central tune of it, called Empathy in the real book, in the original real book, and in fact it's in the new real book as well. And by the way, for those of you who would like to know how I chose such a pretentious sounding title, Empathy is a sort of an anagram of the name Pat Metheny. Work it out. So that was the story. And then I came back to London from there, not really knowing what I was going to do, planning on going to New York. But what happened was my mother said, well, go around and see if you can get any jobs. So I called 25 different possible areas of jobs, arranging and writing and whatever, and only one publisher really liked what I was doing and said, I had an idea for a musical. And he said, well, if you ever do anything with that musical, come back and see me. I was in his office 4 weeks later with an entire musical and the book for the musical. So he was kind of impressed by that, and so was I, and he signed me. So that was the beginning. And then somebody at the publishing company said, "Hey, you can arrange for strings, can't you?" And I said, "Well, yes, I can." Now, at that point, at Berkeley, we didn't have any way of hearing our string stuff played. We just wrote for it. And he said, "Well, I've got this disco track. This guy wants to do a disco track." I said, "I don't really like disco very much." He said, "Well, he'll give you 400 pounds. And I said, "Absolutely, I'll do it." And that was the beginning of my arranging career. And to tell you the honest truth, the phone didn't stop ringing for, 30 years.
Did you do a lot of disco things? I know you worked with Gloria Gaynor, didn't you?
I worked with Gloria Gaynor. I did a lot of disco-y types of things. I did a very famous, it was in the top 10 anyway, if it wasn't a number one, a record called "I Lost My Heart to a Starship Trooper," which featured my discovery, by the way, Sarah Brightman singing. They had a singer for this track, and they lost her, and they said, "Oh my goodness, we need somebody else. Please get somebody." And I said, "I heard this girl," and I had auditioned her about a month before this, and so I went and I said, "Hey, are you interested in doing this record?" And she was with a dance group called Hot Gossip.
They used to be on Top of the Pops.
Arlene Phillips, Hot Gossip.
Yeah.
So they did it as long as the record was credited as Hot Gossip featuring Sarah Brightman. So that was it. I Lost My Heart to a Starship Trooper.
I do remember it.
I'm sure you do, and the outfits were quite enticing.
I think that's maybe what I remember.
Yes.
Well, apart from the music, of course.
Yes, of course. The music was genius, yeah. So there we are. And then as I went on in my career in London, I was fortunate enough to work with so many really great artists and fun artists to work with. And in those days, everybody wanted something interesting. And what can we do that's new? Because we need, that's what sells records, at least in the old days, was new sounds, new ideas. So that was the thing that we were doing. And eventually I got to start producing as well. So it was good fun.
It was very different from now. As you say, there was always looking for something new, something that would just have another twist to it. Whereas now there seems to be a thing of you find a formula that works and just keep repeating it.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine does a lot of production, and he does a lot of music for films and TV. And he was telling me that if you actually listen to the sounds that are used on pop records now, it's probably you could boil it down to about 10 sounds that are constantly used over and over again. And the forms of the tunes are, from a compositional point of view, really exactly the same. Four basic chord progressions, very simple, used in a certain order. And then the other thing, of course, is that all the singers have to have the same vocal inflections and the same sort of little tricks, some of which I really despise. All those little, singers who do all that really fast vibrato, which is completely unnecessary. And they do these little yodeling sounds. I really can't stand them.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But they all have to do it, because otherwise you're not young.
It's like here in the States, you see on TV the opening of a ball game or a baseball game, and someone gets up and sings the national anthem, Star Spangled Banner. I just want to hear someone sing it straight.
I'd love to, but they can't do it. They have to put in those vocals. And the reason why they do that, it's a lack of self-confidence. They don't have any confidence in their own tone and in their own musicality, and they have nothing to say. So they think, well, I'm going to stick with what gets me the applause, which is the screaming and the all the licks, every lick in history, and that's what they do. And I'm sure everybody would say, well, you're just jealous and you're old-fashioned because they're making money and you're not. But actually, I don't care. But from a musical, artistic point of view, I like to hear one singer sound different from the next singer. I want to hear one guitar player sound different from the next guitar player. That's another one of my pet peeves, is the fact that sounding like everybody else is perfectly okay today. And I really find that sad for the art form of music. Just as an example, if you don't mind me complimenting you, what you do it completely in your own way. And you have an instantly recognizable sound, whether you're playing that guitar or any other thing. the way you do the thing you do is very Martin Taylor, and it has its own voice. And musicians today and singers, and for that matter, writers, don't seem to care about that at all. And originality is much less important to everyone.
I think that it's a different time of, when we were younger, it was just finding your own voice, doing your own thing. It was all a bit more hippie-ish. Like,
yeah.
Let's just all do our own stuff. There's more, just generally, I'm not talking just about music here, but with younger people now, there is more of a feeling of wanting to conform.
Yes, conformity.
Yeah, we have more of that now. So for us, our generation, you do sort of think, well, where is this? What happened there? And it's fine. It's fine. I'm not knocking it. It's just that I'm just saying that it's very different.
It's a shame. And here's another thing that I find is kind of sad and dumb. We were talking a little earlier about the fact that when people say, "Oh, I want to do this song," it's a Robbie Williams song, and of course, no, it's a standard written by Jerome Kern. But here's something that people don't think about. If you listen to Robbie Williams' album, it's very well arranged, but it's arranged exactly the same arrangements that Frank Sinatra did, but with Robbie Williams' voice. Now, that's got to be the dumbest thing anybody could possibly do, because Robbie, do you really want to be compared to Frank Sinatra? Do you really want that? No, you don't, because if you hear the same arrangement and his voice, which, it's okay, but it's a bit weedy and it's not Frank, so why do it the same way? If he had done different arrangements, they could still have been, in the older style, but different new arrangements of it, people would have been able to accept him singing the song as a new thing. Oh, this is Robbie Williams' way of doing those things, but they don't think like that. They just, and I've been asked to do a lot of projects as an arranger and producer, where they say, okay, we want you to do these standards, but we want you to do them, just record copy the originals. And most of the time I refuse.
That kind of becomes a bit like, if you have the same accompaniment, it's a bit like kind of becomes a bit like karaoke, really.
It is karaoke.
You've got the same background.
And look what's popular, karaoke. So it's a weird world we live in.
Don't knock it. I once won a T-shirt at a karaoke competition.
Did you really? Was it wet?
No.
Oh, okay. That could have been fun. Yeah. All right. Well, so that was the story. So now where are we up to? Oh yeah. Well, I got to work with a lot of people that were probably just unbelievable. I couldn't believe I was working with them. Paul McCartney. What a guy to work with. I mean, this sounds like a really ridiculous thing to say, but I have to say it. He's really talented. Now, it's a stupid thing to say, but the guy can just pretty much do anything. And I was in the studio with him doing one tune, and he stopped us in the middle, and he said, "Hey, I just got an idea for a song. Would you guys mind if I just went in and laid down a quick demo of it?" No! Sure. So he walked in the studio. He picked up a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and he played the song, which he had just written while we were doing another song, and sang it through. And then he said, "Oh, well, I might as well put some drums on it." He walks over to the drums, played perfect drums, sounding very much like Mr. Starr. And then he picked up the Beatle bass with the set list to Shea Stadium on the bass. I mean, unbelievable. And it plays bass to it. Now it's sounding fantastic. So I'll put a little piano on it. What the hell? And he put some great piano on it. And then he said, call Dick Morrissey and get him to play some saxophone on it tomorrow. And that was it. So that was 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. Done. So that's a talented guy.
That is talent.